Hello and welcome back to 64 Squares Official. Today we are diving into a fascinating encounter from round 7 of the Quantbox Chennai Grandmasters 2026. This is the last round, featuring Grandmaster Dmitry Andreikin taking on Grandmaster Nodirbek Abdusattorov. This was not just another elite Grandmaster game, it was a battle between one of Russia's most experienced players and one of the world's brightest young stars. Andreikin, renowned for his exceptional defensive skills and deep positional understanding, faced Abdusattorov, the former world rapid champion, whose dynamic and fearless style has made him one of the strongest players of his generation. The game began with a Semi-Slav Defense Accepted, evolved into a rich strategic middle game, and eventually transformed into a tense endgame where king activity, pass pawns, and precise calculation determined the outcome. Both players demonstrated world-class ideas, but with the clock ticking down, the game featured a dramatic twists and costly mistakes that completely changed the evaluation multiple times. So let's go through this incredible game move by move and uncover the strategic concepts, tactical ideas, and critical turning points that decided this thrilling battle. Now d4 and d5, knight to f3 and knight to f6, c4 and e6, now knight to c3 and c6. A classical semi-Slav, black builds a very solid pawn chain while keeping flexibility. White intends for e4 expansion, queenside pressure, and active development, whereas black's long-term idea is to challenge the center, eventually strike with d takes c4 and c5. Now bishop to g5, the main line. White pins the knight before committing the center. Now d takes c4, the accepted variation. Black temporarily wins a pawn. The important point is black is not trying to keep the pawn forever. Instead, he gains time while white spends moves recovering it. Now a4, excellent move. This stops b5 ideas, which normally protects the c4 pawn. Now bishop to b4, a very thematic move. Black develops with tempo, forcing white to make a decision. Now e4, a strong central expansion. White now owns a d4 and e5 possibilities and gains space. Now bishop takes c3 with a check. A strategic decision. Black gives up the bishop pair to damage white's pawn structure. White gets a doubled c-pawns, but also bishop pair, central control, and open b file later. Now b takes c3. Queen to a5, attacking the c3 pawn. Excellent pressure. The queen attacks c3 and a4 and creates tactical ideas. Now e5, attacking the knight. A logical move. The knight is chased. White gains space. Now knight to e4, centralized knight. Instead of retreating passively, it jumps to an active outpost. Now rook to c1. A very accurate move. This protects c3 pawn, supports a c4 recovery, and prepares development. Now b5. Black finally supports the extra pawn. Now queen to c2, attacking the knight on e4, also prepares queenside exchanges. Now knight takes g5, black voluntarily exchanges. The reason is that knight has no feature on e4. Now knight takes g5 and queen takes a4. A very ambitious move. Black grabs another pawn, materially attractive, but it simplifies the queen side. Now queen takes a4 and b takes a4. This is a forced move. Now black has queenside majority, an isolated a pawn, and queenside rook activity. Now knight to e4, excellent repositioning. The knight eyes a d6, c5 and f6 squares. Now knight to d7, development continues. Now bishop takes c4. White finally recovers the pawn. Material equality is restored. Now king to e7, an interesting move. The king prepares for rook to d8 and a5 without worrying about castling. Now f4, a typical move. This supports e5 and controls the e5 and f5 squares. White is preparing for kingside expansion. Now a5. Black wants a4, creating a dangerous passer. Now rook to b1, excellent rook placement. The open b file becomes very important. Now bishop to a6, black is going for the exchange of bishops. Black reduces white's bishop pair. Now bishop takes a6 and rook takes a6. Black rook becomes very active. Now king to d2, very strong king move. Since queens are gone, the king becomes an active piece. Now rook h to a8, doubling ideas. Black's rooks become very active. Now c4, this is a critical move. White grabs space. This supports a d5 square. Now c5, correct reaction from black, challenging white's center immediately. Now d5, excellent move. White gains the protected pass pawn. This pawn will dominate the game. Now f6, a necessary counterplay from black. White simply keeps expanding. Now rook to b7. The engine dislikes this move. The rook becomes active, but the king should have become active first. The better option was king to c3, bringing the king forward where it supports the pass pawn. The rook move looks natural but delays king activation. Now rook 6 to a7, a good defensive move. Black challenges the active rook. Now d6 check, a very strong move. The pass pawn reaches d6, creating permanent pressure. Now king to d8. This is a forced move. The king blocks. Now rook to b5. This move maintains activity and targets c5. F takes e5. Black finally breaks the center, and f takes e5. White keeps a pass pawn. Now knight takes e5. A very good simplification. Black removes white's strongest central piece. Now rook takes c5, attacking the knight on e5. Excellent practical decision. White wins another pawn. Knight to d7, attacking the rook. The knight finally blocks d6. Now rook to b5, maintains pressure. Everything now revolves around the d pawn. And now knight to f6. This is a defensive blunder by Nodirbek. This changes the entire evaluation. The knight abandons key defensive squares. More importantly, black king loses coordination. The correct continuation was king to c8, bringing the king toward b7 and b8 while supporting promotion threats. Instead, black's pieces become disconnected. Now knight to c5, a fantastic move by Andreikin. Now white knights attack d7, b7 and e6 squares and dominates the board. The knight becomes stronger than a rook. Now rook to c8, the only defensive move. Now rook to e1, targeting the e6 pawn. A very strong move. The rook joins the attack. Everything targets e6 and d7. Now king to e8, a passive move. Black is tied down now. Now king to c3, excellent king activation. The king now supports a c5, d4 and b4. Now a3, this is too optimistic. This is a second turning point of the game. Black raises the pawn but neglects king safety. The stronger move was king to f7, centralizing the king. Now knight takes e6, a beautiful move. White wins another pawn while keeping complete control. The knight now dominates. Now a2, trying to promote the pawn. Black counterplay begins. The pawn is suddenly very dangerous. Now c5. This is a mistake by Andreikin, a very serious mistake. The move looks natural, but it allows black to equalize. The correct move was knight to c5, a powerful Jiu-Jitsu. The check forces the king away, keeping control over the a pawn while preserving white's initiative. Instead, white become too focused on advancing the c pawn. Now king to d7. Now black is back into the game. Now knight takes g7, still practical. White collects another pawn. Now knight to d5 check. Here is a new huge blunder from Nodirbek. The winning move was king to c6, or even more directly activating the king while preparing for a1 queen. At the right moment, black's advanced a pawn was his main source of counterplay, and accurate coordination could have neutralized white's extra material. Instead, the knight check lets white's king improve its position while the dangerous pawn is still not promoted. Now king to c4, an excellent move. The king heads straight toward the queen side. Now king to c6, another missed opportunity. Black still had the immediate resource of pushing toward promotion, but by delaying decisive action, the initiative slips away. Now knight to f5, an excellent move. The knight returns, covering promotion squares while attacking everything. Now rook to e8, a logical move, but it's too late. White cannot take the e8 rook because black will then queen. Now knight to d4 check. The knight completely dominates. Every piece now cooperates. Now king to d7. This is the force move. Now c6 check. A beautiful finish. Now white has a protected pass c pawn, protected d pawn, and active king, a dominant knight, rook support, and black's position collapses. And it was in this position Abdusattorov resigned because he cannot stop white's connected pass pawns while also dealing with active king and knight. Let's take a look at some of the strategic lessons from the game. King activity decides endgames. Andreikin's king march, king to d2, king to c3 and king to c4 was one of the biggest reasons he eventually prevailed. A protected pass pawn is a long-term asset. The pawn on d6 tied black's pieces down for many moves, restricting their activity. Peace activity is often worth more than material. Andreikin's knight repeatedly found dominant outposts on c5, e6, f5 and d4 squares, outweighing black's temporary material gains. Pass pawns must be handled with precision. Abdusattorov advanced a pawns created serious counterplay, but inaccurate timing prevented it from becoming decisive. Time pressure changes everything. Both players made significant mistakes after move 27, illustrating how even elite grandmasters can miss critical continuations when the clock becomes a major factor. Now let's take a look at some of the critical moments of this game. D5 on move 21. This is an excellent move. This created a powerful protected pass pawn. Rook to b7 on move 22. This was an inaccurate move. An active rook but delayed the king's ideal activation. Knight to f6 on move 27. This was a game-changing blunder. This allowed white's knight to seize key outpost and increased white's advantage dramatically. Knight to c5 on move 28. This was an excellent move. This centralized the knight and intensified pressure on black's position. a3 on move 30. This was an inaccuracy. This advanced the pass pawn but neglected more active king play. c5 on move 32. This was white's major mistake. This missed the stronger tactical continuation with the knight to c5 check on move 32, letting black back into the game. And knight to d5 check on move 33. This was black's decisive error. Black failed to make the most of the advanced a pawn and gave white renewed control. And c6 check on move 37. This was the winning move. This connected pass pawns and active pieces left black without adequate defense. Overall, this was an instructive game in transitioning from opening to endgame, highlighting the value of king activity, knight outposts, and pass pawn management. It also serves as an excellent example of how the evaluation of an endgame can swing dramatically when both players are under severe time pressure. So hope you enjoyed this move by move analysis video. Do give a like and subscribe the channel. So that's it for today. See you in the next one.